It's March 11, 1968. You're 400 feet beneath the surface of the Sea of Okhotsk off the coast of Soviet Russia. Your submarine, USS Halibut, is less than 6 miles from a Soviet naval base. One wrong move, one mechanical failure, one detected sound, and you've just triggered World War III. Your wife thinks you're on a routine patrol in the Pacific. She has no idea you're inside enemy waters, hunting for something that could change the balance of nuclear power forever. And if you die here, the Navy will tell her you were lost at sea. Nothing more, because this mission doesn't exist. To understand why men risked their lives in the ocean's darkest depths, we need to go back to 1945. World War II has ended. But almost immediately, a new conflict begins, not fought on battlefields, but in the shadows: the Cold War. America and the Soviet Union, two superpowers armed with enough nuclear weapons to end civilization, locked in a silent standoff. But there's a problem: intelligence. How do you know what your enemy is planning when they're hiding behind an iron curtain? How do you track their nuclear capabilities when their military installations are thousands of miles away, heavily guarded and off-limits to the west? The answer came from an unlikely place: the ocean, specifically nuclear-powered submarines capable of staying submerged for months at a time, silent, invisible, deadly. In 1954, the USS Nautilus became the world's first nuclear submarine. Unlike diesel subs that had to surface regularly, nuclear subs could stay underwater indefinitely, limited only by food supplies and crew sanity. This changed everything. Suddenly, the ocean floor became a highway for espionage. The CIA and US Navy developed a program so secret, it didn't have an official name. Historians now call it the Underwater Espionage Program. The mission: send submarines into Soviet territorial waters to wiretap undersea communication cables, photograph military installations, track nuclear missile tests, and retrieve sunken Soviet equipment. But these weren't ordinary naval deployments. Crews were hand-picked. Missions were classified top secret, special access required. If you served on one of these missions, you couldn't tell anyone, not your spouse, not your children, not even other submariners. Many crew members took these secrets to their graves. The most dangerous of these missions: Operation Ivy Bells, Operation Holystone, and the hunt for K-129, a lost Soviet submarine carrying nuclear missiles. Today, we're diving into 3 missions that changed history. Missions where a single mistake could have ended the world. 1971. The Sea of Okhotsk, a Soviet-controlled body of water surrounded by Russian territory. This is enemy waters. The USS Halibut, a modified Polaris submarine, has been equipped with special deep-sea cameras and a team of Navy divers trained in saturation diving, a technique that allows them to work at extreme depths. Their target: an undersea communication cable connecting the Soviet Pacific Fleet headquarters to Moscow. Soviet military planners believed these cables were untouchable. After all, they're buried in 400 feet of freezing water, miles from land, monitored constantly. They never imagined the Americans would be insane enough to send divers down to tap them. But that's exactly what happened. For weeks, Halibut stayed submerged, hovering above the cable. Divers descended in shifts, attaching a sophisticated recording device, essentially a giant wiretap to the Soviet cable. Every conversation, every order, every classified message sent between the Soviet Navy and Moscow, now being recorded by the United States. For nearly a decade, the Americans returned regularly to swap recording tapes. The intelligence collected was staggering: Soviet naval movements, missile test schedules, strategic plans. It gave the US a window directly into Soviet military thinking. But in 1981, everything collapsed. A former NSA analyst named Ronald Pelton sold the details of Operation Ivy Bells to the KGB for $35,000. The Soviets pulled up the taps, displayed them in a museum, and one of the most successful espionage operations in history was over. Pelton was later arrested and sentenced to life in prison. But the damage was done. While Ivy Bells was listening to Soviet communications, another program was tracking their submarines directly. It was called Operation Holystone. And it was even more dangerous. The concept was simple but insane. American attack submarines would secretly follow Soviet ballistic missile submarines, sometimes for weeks, recording their acoustic signatures, photographing their hull designs, learning their patrol routes. Imagine this. You're in a submarine designed to be silent, but you're trailing another submarine that's also designed to be silent. You're both operating in total darkness, relying entirely on sonar. Get too close, they'll hear you. Stay too far, you'll lose them. And if they detect you, you're in their waters. There's no backup, no rescue. The intelligence gathered was invaluable. By understanding Soviet submarine noise profiles, the US could develop better detection systems. By mapping their patrol routes, the Navy knew where to position forces in the event of war. But these missions came terrifyingly close to disaster. In 1970, USS Gato collided with a Soviet submarine while trailing it near the Kamchatka Peninsula. Both vessels were damaged. The Soviet sub surfaced. The Gato escaped undetected, barely. In another incident, USS Tautog rammed a Soviet Echo-class submarine during a surveillance operation. The Soviet sub was so badly damaged it had to be towed to port. These weren't accidents, they were calculated risks. And the men aboard knew, if something went wrong, their government would deny everything. March 8, 1968. Somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, a Soviet Golf-class ballistic missile submarine, K-129, vanishes without a trace. It's carrying 3 nuclear-tipped ballistic missiles and a crew of 98 men. The Soviets search frantically, but they have no idea where it went down. The Americans do, using a network of underwater listening devices called SOSUS, the US. Navy detected an unusual acoustic event, a Soviet submarine imploding at crushing depth. They knew roughly where it happened, but the Soviets didn't. This presented an opportunity. If the Americans could find K-129 and recover it, or even parts of it, they could access Soviet nuclear missile technology, codebooks, and cryptographic equipment. The CIA launched one of the most ambitious covert operations in history, Project Azorian. They built a massive salvage ship, the Hughes Glommer Explorer, under the cover story of mining manganese nodules from the ocean floor. Designed by Howard Hughes, the ship was actually a giant claw designed to lift a 2,000-ton submarine from 16,000 feet below the surface. In 1974, the Glommer Explorer reached the site. The claw descended. It took hours. At 16,000 feet in complete darkness, the claw closed around K-129, and then it began to lift. But halfway up, disaster, part of the claw failed. 2/3 of the submarine, including the nuclear missiles, fell back to the ocean floor. Only the forward section was recovered, including the bodies of 6 Soviet sailors. The CIA gave those sailors a proper burial at sea, filmed and recorded. Decades later, the footage was shared with Russia. What the Americans recovered from that fragment remains classified to this day. But intelligence experts believe it included codebooks, targeting data, and insights into Soviet missile technology, intelligence that shaped the remainder of the Cold War. For decades, the men who served on these missions stayed silent. Even after the Cold War ended, even after the Soviet Union collapsed, they'd been trained to keep secrets, and they did. It wasn't until the late 1990s and early 2000s that the US government began declassifying these operations. Suddenly, the public learned about Ivy Bells, Holystone, and Project Azorian. Books were written, documentaries were made. Veterans finally got recognition for missions they'd never been allowed to talk about. But the impact of these missions, that's still being felt. The intelligence gathered from Soviet submarine tracking directly led to improvements in sonar, stealth technology, and anti-submarine warfare. The acoustic signatures recorded during Holystone missions helped the US Navy develop systems that could detect Soviet subs from hundreds of miles away. The communications intercepted during Ivy Bells gave American negotiators insight into Soviet thinking during arms control talks, potentially preventing miscalculations that could have sparked nuclear war. And Project Azorian. While the CIA didn't recover the entire submarine, the intelligence from the forward section, codebooks, missile components, crew documents, gave the US a rare look inside Soviet strategic capabilities. But there's a darker legacy, too. These missions normalized operating in enemy waters. They created a precedent for undersea espionage that continues today. Only now, it's not just the US and Russia. China has its own submarine espionage program. So does Britain, France, and other nations. And with 99% of the world's internet traffic now traveling through undersea cables, just like those Soviet military cables in the 1970s, the ocean floor has become the most important intelligence battleground of the 21st century. The techniques pioneered during the Cold War, they're still in use. Only now the technology is more advanced, the stakes are higher, and the missions are even more secret. There's a memorial at the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. On it are the names of submariners who died in service, but next to many of those names, there's no explanation, no mission. No location, just a date, because even in death, their missions remain classified. The men who sailed into Soviet waters during the Cold War did so knowing they might never come home. Knowing their families would never know the truth. Knowing that if they died, there'd be no public funeral, no medal ceremony, no acknowledgement, just silence. But their work mattered. Every day that passed without nuclear war was a day one, in part, because of the intelligence gathered in the ocean's depths. Every arms control treaty signed was informed by the secrets those submariners brought back. They called it the silent service for a reason. They operated in silence. They served in silence. And for decades, they died in silence, but history remembers because some secrets are worth keeping and some sacrifices are worth honoring.